So this is definitely going to look weird on your screen. And again, at some point, I'll get better at this. I will. I promise. And honestly, I'm just saying that to myself. Hey, you need to get better at this. But what I wanted to show before I started rotating the screen and going to specific pages is, as I was alluding to in my last video, talking about the Apple Watch Ultra and the Series 8 and then the SE, kind of all mushed together. Um, Apple, for the phone, it took them a long time to do it, but they are doing a good job of appealing to the masses. So everybody's not going to buy the iPhone 14 Pro. In fact, that will not be their most popular device. The 14s will be pretty popular, but for people who don't want to pay that price, which I believe they start at $800, they are now keeping older phones available. And there was a period in time when they were doing that. Then I think they stopped briefly, then they started again. And man, if I could go back in time, or I could just go back and look at Apple's old keynotes, because I know that you should just kind of bump stuff down. But I really feel like there was a year where they kind of tried to, I think they had stopped like selling the previous year's one, but they'd have one from like 2 years ago or something. I don't know. But here you can see, okay, we got the 14 Pros, which are the most expensive. We got the 14s, which are still kind of expensive, but not as expensive. We got the 13s, which are a little cheaper now. We got the SE, which is, yeah, $429. So we're talking, yes, if you want a phone that is still pretty solid, but doesn't look like any of the newer ones, but does have the internals of, I think, the iPhone 12. I think that's the 12. Then boom, you can get that. Or if you just want the 12, boom, you can buy the iPhone 12. And of course, that price would be, I think the iPhone 12 starts at the same price as the 13. But the reason that is possible is because Apple is still selling the 13 mini. So you could either get an iPhone 13 mini or you can get a regular iPhone 12 for the same price. I'm a mini guy, so I definitely would get the mini, but I'm not going to buy either of those from Apple directly. I'll end up probably buying a mini sometime, used on eBay or something. But yeah, you can see that across the board, like Apple is doing a good job of, you got a phone that starts at $429, you got a phone that starts, I think, at $599, $699, $799, $899, just and going up either in terms of generation or storage capacity, screen size. So plenty of options when it comes to the phone, because that's where they hook you. If you get a phone, you might get some AirPods, which they have here on this page. You get a phone, you might get a watch. You get a phone, you might get an iPad. Now, there's nothing saying you can't have an iPad or a Mac without a phone. So that's definitely possible. But you're not going to have AirPods without an iPhone. You're not going to have an Apple Watch without an iPhone in the family. And because they have the whole family set up. So, but in order for the Apple Watch to work, somebody has to have an iPhone. So, we'll leave it at that. I'm going to pause this, rotate the screen, get it to where I want it to be. Then we'll be right back. So I'm not going to go over all the phones that. Whoop, come on, hey. Yeah, I'm not going to go over all the phones because technically they've released 4, but it's really just a regular iPhone and a Pro, and each one of those has a larger version of it. And it's interesting that they've decided to call the 14 the bigger one Plus, going back to their 6, 7, and 8 years or generations, but the big 14 Pro is a Max. So I whatever, just a way to differentiate it, I guess. I don't know. But the first thing you're going to notice is the display. 14 still has the notch, which is fine. And with the Pro, they've decided to call that the Dynamic Island. And I feel like they had to put a name on it because they know that the notch didn't have a name. And that's all we call it. It's a notch. That's what it is. I'm sure somebody else might call it something different. But Apple said, you know what? We need to get ahead of this. We need to make it appealing for some reason. And yeah, we're going to call it something. I do encourage you, if you have not, to go watch their keynote. Even if you just fast forward to the stuff about the 14 Pro series, it's interesting. They are definitely making it sound something like it's something better than what it really is, because it really is just a cutout in the middle of your screen. Excuse me. So that way they can put the Face ID stuff, camera. I think the earpiece is up at the top, but yeah, because it's all under glass, you can still have it react to touch there's still a touch response because it's still under glass, and the digitizer is still on top of it. So essentially, yeah, it's just a blank part of your screen that still responds to it when you touch it. So cool, I guess. But I've also and see, this is another thing where I don't know if the analysts are correct, and I don't want to spew false information, but analysts made it sound like the cost of the screen for Apple was more expensive with this new design. But the good thing after seeing the event today is that the cost of the phone for the consumer is staying the same. So my question obviously is, well, if you just kept the old form, could you have lowered the price of the phone? Which obviously they're not going to do because they know we're going to buy it. But I guess kudos to them if the cost of manufacturing was more expensive, that they actually kept the cost to the consumer the same. Back of the phone, still the same for the regular model and the Pro model, so nothing really to get on there. Different colors. Starting prices, yes, $800 for the regular, $1,000 for the Pro models. 6.1-inch screens. Now, here's something for me, and I feel like I'm going to be a lot more talkative with this one because, yeah, I didn't really care about the watches. Don't really care about the AirPods, so I don't even think I'm going to talk about those too much. But for, man, I think it was the 11. I think the 11 Pro was smaller than the regular iPhone 11. And that Pro size, I like that. I think it was 5.9 inches. If they made that in the Pro model, I would buy that. Like I wouldn't buy the latest one. I'll tell you that right now. But that screen size still appeals to me. 6.1 isn't bad, and I think we just kind of get used to it. But 5.9, I think for me would have been perfect. In fact, my roommate, she had, I think, yeah, it was an 11 Pro, and then she said for her the phone was too small, so she ended up getting a Pro Max. But when I would hold that phone, I said this is good. Like there's heft to it, but because it's small, it just feels like a very dense phone. And I would go from, since they've got rid of the minis, which that would be my preferred model, but since they've got rid of the minis, I definitely would just say, all right, well, I'm just gonna get a Pro model because it's 5.9 inches. Yes, it's a little more expensive, but the feel in my hand is preferential for that smaller form factor. But from a manufacturing standpoint, yeah, it makes sense just to have two sizes, 6.1, 6.7 for the plus and the max. So whatever, I get it. Now, here are two additional things that I question. So the ProMotion technology, which is the phone being able to ramp up to 120 hertz. When it comes to these variable refresh rates, I'm never sure how they are going to respond to the user. So I'll give you an example. Give an example. And I hate that I have to talk about Android. I don't hate that I have to talk about it because I like talking about Android. I think it's a better operating system, but whatever. But what Android at least allows you to do, and maybe it's in the settings somewhere in iOS that I just don't know, so I'm not going to say it's not there. But what Android allows you to do is go into developer options and turn on the ability for the user to see what the current screen refresh rate is. So on my Sony, for instance, uh, it's not a dynamic refresh rate. So I go into developer options, turn on that setting, and I see that my phone is operating at 120 hertz. The screen's refresh rate is 120 hertz. I recently found out you can just turn it down to 60. Didn't know that. But yeah, but either way, it's not dynamic. It just stays at whatever you set it for. Cool. For me, I like that. I would say a con to that is that battery life isn't as great as it could be because, yes, like right now, I'm staring at a screen. Nothing is going on the screen. So if I don't need the screen to refresh, 120 times a second, then yeah, it's okay for it to ramp down because it's a static image. So I understand the point of it, but the point of me even mentioning this is because if it's static, at least I know what it's always going to be. When it's dynamic, I don't know what it's always going to be, and I don't know what triggers those changes. So when I look at my Samsung Galaxy S22, that does have a dynamic refresh rate, and well, you can turn it on or off. But if you turn it on, yes, it can ramp up to 120 hertz, but it can ramp down as low as 24. Sometimes it'll be 60. And yeah, but it'll oscillate between them. And what triggers it to ramp up to 120 is human interaction. So if I scroll on the screen, like if I start scrolling, it'll ramp up to 120. Cool. What I didn't realize until I watched a high definition movie and there was some fast some fast scenes in there, but there ended up being a lot of jitter, and I left the visual of what the current refresh rate is on. When it ramps down to 24, sometimes moving images on the screen were not able to keep up with that current refresh rate. Because at that point, it does because it becomes static because I'm not physically touching the screen. So it ramps down to 24. But personally, I'd want it to stay up at 120 if I'm watching content that would benefit from a higher refresh rate. So with Apple's ProMotion technology, I'm assuming that it's similar where it only responds to your input, but if you're watching a video, then it probably ramps. I don't know. I don't own a phone that has it. I think my roommate has. I think she has the 13 Pro Max, so that has it, and I don't think she's complained about it. But it would be nice to be able to just see like, oh, I know that my screen is operating at this refresh rate while I am doing this activity. So yeah, it's cool, and of course Apple has to brand it as something. Um, but yeah, I would like to confidently say, hey, while I am doing this, this is the refresh rate that my screen is operating at. Now, I could, nitpick, 120 hertz displays are available on mid-range Android devices. Why doesn't Apple bring it to just all of their devices? They could, but they're not going to. Whatever. No sense in getting all nitpicky about that. Now, I will say though, I mean, with always on display, I feel like that's they've allowed that feature because of the preceding feature. So I can't say, oh yeah, always on displays are definitely something that have been around for a long time because that is true. But one is building on the other. So if you want an always on display, you need, according to Apple, a display that has a variable refresh rate. So if you want that, you got to get the Pro model. Not going to nitpick on it too much, but that's just the way that it is. So here we here we go. I was talking about it above. Excuse the noise that I'm making. I'm just getting comfortable. Oh, and there it goes again. The dynamic island is just them getting ahead of people calling it a pill or a punch out or whatever else somebody would end up calling it. But yeah, Apple gave it a name. So now we as consumers, I don't know if I will ever, I guess, give in and just call it the dynamic island. The punch out. It's a punch out. That's what it is. But of course, Apple is going to brand it as something. Well, as a result of the notch not being branded and the backlash that they received for so it came out with the 10, the 11, the 10, the 10s, the 11, the 12, the 13. All right, so 5 years, man, time is really flying. Holy smokes, that was 5 years ago. Now I'm just kind of dumbfounded. All right, yeah, all right. So, but yeah, they had to slap a brand on it so that way we don't call it whatever we would call it. And from what some of the earlier renders were suggesting, uh, it's really an eye, but maybe they just connected them so that way it's not two separate things. I don't know. But it is what it is. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it because I'm not going to say it looks stupid because it doesn't. I mean, if you are going to get to the point where a lot of these manufacturers have gotten, where they refuse to have decent size bezels or size appropriate bezels, so that way they can put the hardware in the bezel, then you get notches, you get punch outs of varying size, and that's that. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but that's what they call it, the dynamic island. All right. And I'm happy that I was wrong because in my Apple Watch rant, I said that I thought on the screen When I was watching the actual keynote, they said that crash detection was only available in the Pro series, but it's good to see that it's available in the regular 14. So good to hear. Cameras are cameras. I'm not a camera guy, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about them. Definitely some updates, bigger batteries in the Pros. It looks like. Now here's an interesting little tidbit here. All right. Now, if I had the bigger screen, then I could show you maybe three iPhones next to each other. So you're gonna have to take my word for it, or you can go verify it yourself. But the Pro model, yes, got the A16. So the A16 Bionic is the new chip for 2022. But the 14s have the A15 Bionic, which is the same chip that was in the iPhone 13. Now, the difference, I believe, which I didn't know this when the 13s came out, is that technically there were some differences between the Pros and the regulars. I think the Pro 13 got an additional GPU core. Not sure about the CPU, but there were some subtle differences between the Pros and the regular. But same generational chip. And I believe what ends up happening is during the manufacturing process, nothing's perfect. So when some of the silicon is, damaged at the molecular level or the microscopic level, they say, oh, well, this damaged one still works, but not to the extent of one that isn't damaged. So we'll end up deactivating one of the cores. So that way, it's not work. It wouldn't work anyway. So we deactivate it. We slap that into our cheaper phone, and then we continue forward. So still same generational chip for the iPhone 13, 13 Pro, and now iPhone 14. Now, I really do have to ask, and this, I would love to ask this question. Like, all right, Mr. Cook, 5 years from now, the iPhone 13 is going to be reaching end of life. Maybe even 6 years. I'm just speculating. So whatever year it is, where the iPhone 19 or something is about to come out, you now have two phones in two different generations that are sharing the same SoC, the A15 Bionic chip. How do you handle sunsetting these products? Because you have to say, all right, well, the iPhone 14, regardless of what chip is in it, well, you can't say regardless, but it has the same chip as what was in definitely the iPhone 13 Pro series, but if I'm going to say also the same chip as what's in the regular iPhone 13. So are you able to say, well, the 13s are now dead. We're going to keep the 14 around, even though it has the same internals? Or are you going to say, well, we're going to now sunset the 13s and the 14, not the 14 Pro? So yeah, in terms of support, I just wonder, how are they going to handle this 5 or 6 years from now? A question that they're definitely they already have an answer to, most likely. They'll probably see how many of whatever phones are still on the market. Is it worth them validating that whatever version of iOS is going to be coming out that year is worth supporting an older device? Blah 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 blah. But I guess the comparison is that the iPhone 6S and the first SE had the same internals. So when but they didn't come out the same month. I think there might have been like a 6 month gap. So not a whole different generation. But the point is, even though the release of the phones weren't at the same time, because they're the same internals, when one died, the other one had to die as well. What's going to happen with the 13s and the regular iPhone 14 in 5 or 6 years? Just curious. Of course, all this other stuff is the same. Yeah, not really any differences here. For the 14 Pro model, you have up to 1 TB of storage. Now, this also does bring me up to another question. Okay, Apple will innovate sometimes. Other times they just, it's iterative, year over year updates. All fine and dandy. I'm not a manufacturer, but they all do that. And that's perfectly fine. Now, here is my question. And it's not even a question, but Like, yeah, I can tell I am so much more animated in this rant compared to my ones about the watch, because I really don't care about the watches. But with these phones, all right, you were telling me you were going to give me up to a terabyte of storage on this phone. All right, a terabyte. I'm taking pictures, I'm recording videos, so forth and so forth. How am I getting this content off of this phone? Like, this is not a standalone device. I mean, it is because, yes, you can't, I mean, you don't need anything else for the phone to work properly. But with all that content, I mean, you're saying this phone is, and its cameras are good enough to record movies. How am I getting the content off of the phone? Well, then you have two options. Okay. You have AirDrop. Okay. And I'll tell you this, people. I'll tell you this. I just, for shits and giggles, excuse my language, I decided to, and this process took a long time, and I'm going to explain it all. I had a relatively large video file, high definition video file. It was on my Windows PC, and I wanted to get it on my Mac. So that way I could, and I'll just tell you what I did instead of what I wanted to do. I'll tell you what. So, had this large, I think it was like 30 gigs, 30 gig movie on my Windows PC. I don't have like a Thunderbolt flash drive or a Thunderbolt external SSD. I need to buy one. But what I ended up using was my Android phone. I connected my Android phone to my Windows machine through the appropriate connector. And I'm not going to say the connector yet because but you know what connector it is, but I'm not going to say what it is yet. So I connected, it took maybe, I don't know, a minute and a half, 2 minutes to transfer the file. I mean, I really don't remember, but it was fast. I do it so regularly that it's not an exhaustive amount of time. So, I copy it from, my computer to my phone. Cool. Now I'm like, all right, I need to get this on my Mac. And I'll explain why I'm doing all this in a second. But I need to get this video file that is on my, I think it was, in fact, it was on this Galaxy S22 that I'm talking to you on. I need to get this 30 gig file onto my Mac. Connect the phone to the Mac. The Mac just doesn't recognize it. Now, I'm like, okay, that's weird. So do a quick Google, and yeah, you need to download some stuff from Google or from Android, however you want to look at it, to allow the Mac to recognize the computer. Cool. So I do that. Movie copies over, no problem. Cool. So then I'm like, all right. The whole reason that I'm even doing this is because my roommate got the 14-inch MacBook Pro, and the display on that is supposed to be so much better than that of the regular 13-inch MacBooks. I need to get it over there. Now, of course, I could have just taken my Android device and copied it directly to her machine. But one, I don't like when people download stuff on my computer. So I didn't, like, I asked her and she said it was fine. But I was like, what? I know. If you say no, I understand, because I also don't like it. So boom, don't even worry about it. But I also want to test something else. So with these phones, these newer phones, these newer computers, we should have improved Wi-Fi speeds. And with those improved Wi-Fi speeds, I would assume we would have improved AirDrop speeds. Now, the only way I could truly test that is to get older devices and see how long it takes to transfer stuff via AirDrop of these older devices. But I don't have that, so I can't. But all I can do is compare wired connections to wireless connections. So this movie is now on my Mac. I wanted to get it to my roommate's Mac. Decided to use AirDrop. So to send this 30 gig file using AirDrop, it took 13 minutes. All right, 13 minutes. I'll say it probably took 2. I'll even say 3. I mean, I know it didn't take 3, but just for the sake of, assuming that more time passed than it actually did. When I connected my phone to my Windows computer, copied it over, and even copied the phone to the Mac, let's say it took 3 minutes. Again, and that's on the extreme side. I didn't record it like I should have, and I'll record some video at some point showing the differences. But yeah, 3 minutes. But 3 minutes compared to 13 minutes, even if it were 5 minutes, which I know it wasn't 5 minutes. So now I'm just being a jerk to be. but it was probably like a minute and a half. But we're talking way faster speeds, okay? And it's like, all right, so you give me a terabyte of storage. If I have a Mac, I can transfer it via AirDrop. But given that much space and the sizes of some of these video files, it's going to take forever. And then you're like, well, wait a minute. The iPhone has a port. Can't you just connect it using that port? Interesting that you ask, because the iPhone still uses Lightning. All right. And you might say, well, okay, what's the big deal about that? Well, if you didn't know, Lightning still runs at USB 2.0 speeds. And you might say, well, I'm not sure what's going on. What does that mean? What does that mean? 2.0 speeds. All right. So case in point, USB 3.0 is roughly 10 times faster than USB 2.0. So for the sake of this conversation, let's say it did take 3 minutes for me to transfer those video files using a wired connection operating at USB 3.0 speeds. So to make that same file transfer using something that is 10 times slower, we're talking almost 30 minutes. Holy smokes. Now, I didn't do it because I wasn't going to. Plus, I didn't have an option to get the phone on my iPhone. I tried, but I didn't do it. But by those, like now I'm thinking, well, from Apple's standpoint, well, if we're talking about USB 2.0 speeds and we're comparing those to AirDrop speeds, now AirDrop is faster. Like, well, yeah, it is because you've purposely kept a technology on your phone that is, I think we're talking like older than 20 years old. USB 2.0 was available in the 90s. So we're talking technology. You know what? I'm going to look this up. I'm going to pause. No, I'm not going to pause it up. You're going to hear me typing in the background. Because at this point, nobody's even listening or watching this right now. But USB 2.0 release date. USB 2.0. Okay, so I was wrong. Not available in the 90s, but it was released in April of 2000. All right. So we're talking 22-year-old frameworks or whatever that Apple just keeps around. And even USB 3.0 was announced in 2008. So even the technology that I'm using is old, but it still operates at a way faster speed. We're talking 5 gigabits compared to 480 megabits per second. Okay. Now, the connection that I'm using on my Galaxy, on the Mac, on my Windows PCs, on most of the iPads right now is USB-C. So, for me, you give me all this storage on these new iPhones, but you make it a terrible experience getting any of the content off of the iPhone. Thanks, Apple. But yeah, thanks for also saying, well, if you look at Lightning speeds compared to AirDrop speeds, then AirDrop is actually fast. Well, yeah, it is, but it's still slow compared to still relatively old technology because, yeah, if we're talking like USB 2.0, 480 megabits, cool. USB 3.0, 5 gigabits, so that's 10 times faster, all right? Then we have USB 3. Whatever, 10 gigabit. So that's double the speed again. Then we have 20 gigabit. Then we have USB 4, and slash Thunderbolt 3 slash Thunderbolt 4, which is 40 gigabits. So we're talking stuff that is substantial. I mean, astronomically faster. So if we did the math, that'd be twice times another. So 80 times faster, than USB 2.0 speeds. Yet Apple keeps it around. So yes, the iPhone 15 is supposed to not have the Lightning port. Supposed to switch over to USB-C. So we'll see if that actually happens. Well, no, it will happen, but it'll happen, and then Apple will rave about it as if they. Well, and it's they did really help create USB-C, but it just sucks that it's taken them so long to put it on the iPhone. So that of all the trash. I won't say trash, all the stuff that they talked about today, that if they had just walked on stage and be like, yeah, the iPhone 14 is exactly like the iPhone 13, except it has USB-C, operates at Thunderbolt speeds when transferring files. We've actually created the iPhone to allow the user to see the file system. I would go buy one. Like I would be like, yep, that is it. That is it. At this point you are treating the iPhone like a computer, and I will buy it. In fact, I might even buy it brand new. I'm gonna trade in this iPhone 12 mini and get a 14. And unfortunately, they don't have the 5.9-inch screen anymore. But yeah, if they finally treated the iPhone like a computer, I'd say I'm gonna get that, and I might even buy it brand new. But they didn't. So all of that to say, you give me all the storage, but what am I supposed to do with the stuff that I've accumulated on this? Because it's terrible. The experience is terrible to get the content off. All right. Now I ranted about all this other stuff, and I don't really care too much. I'm just going to scroll stuff you might care about. Looks like the Pro is slightly bigger, but slightly narrower. I did not know that. All right. Stuff I don't really care about. Blah blah. I already talked about this stuff. Cameras again, I don't really care about. Anything else? Yeah, camera stuff again. It's like, well, you give me all this camera stuff. How am I supposed to get the content off the phone? More camera stuff. Safety, carriers, cellular connectivity, and yeah, Wi-Fi 6. That's what I was referring to with like improved Wi-Fi speed. So I'd assume that AirDrop has also gotten faster. Interesting here. I talked about it in the Apple Watch rant that I made, but the latest versions of the Apple Watch SE and the Apple Watch Series 8 both have Bluetooth 5.0. The Apple Watch Ultra has Bluetooth 5.3. Interesting here to see that they put 5.3 on both versions of the iPhone, so why not the newer Apple Watches? Don't know. Do not know. All this other same stuff. And I think that's about it, because these things are these things. And the reason that, I'm comfortable just scrolling so fast is, if I could summarize it, my LiDAR scanner for the pros. Here's something. Okay. So, and in fact, I'm gonna stop this video and create another one, because at this point we're getting too long.